They gave me the posting on a Wednesday in early October. The paperwork called it Thermal Monitoring and Perimeter Observation, GS7 classification, stationed at what the Park Service listed as Observation Point Kilo, Norris Basin Sector. The pay was 14% higher than my last position. I did not ask about the 14%. A ranger named Duval met me at the Norris Geyser Basin trailhead at 4 in the afternoon. He was a tall man, maybe 60, with sun-damaged skin and eyes that moved constantly, never settling on any one thing for long. He did not introduce himself by name. I read his badge. He handed me a steel key ring with 8 keys, each labeled with a strip of colored tape, and a manila envelope sealed with a strip of packing tape, pressed down hard at both ends. "You worked thermal monitoring in the Teton backcountry," he said. It was not a question. 3 seasons, I told him. He nodded once, like that was either enough or barely enough, and he started walking. We took the back trail, not the boardwalk. The path Duval followed was unmarked, packed dirt that wound between the main basin features and cut north through a section of dead lodgepole pine. The sulfur smell was heavy here, the kind that coats the back of your throat and stays there. The ground changed color as we walked. White crust near the thermal vents, orange bacterial mats along the runoff channels, gray mud in the depressions that burped and shifted like something breathing beneath the surface. Duval stopped at a locked gate I had not seen marked on any public map. He used a key from his own ring and held the gate open without looking at me. Past the gate, the trail narrowed further, the trees thinned, the ground steamed. We came to the station after 20 minutes of walking. It was smaller than I expected. A single-room structure, maybe 600 square feet, built on a raised platform with composite decking to keep it off the thermal ground. The walls were corrugated metal painted a dull green that had long since faded toward gray. A propane tank sat chained to the east side. A small equipment shed stood 30 yards to the north. To the west, maybe 50 yards out, the ground dropped into a broad thermal flat. I could hear the water moving beneath the crust even from this distance. A low, constant gurgling like something digesting. Duval pointed to the shed. "Generator is there, runs quiet. Fuel in the locker on the south side of the shed, 12 cans. Do not open the north locker." He said it the same way he said everything else, flat, without emphasis, which somehow made it worse than if he had said it urgently. "Radio is inside on the desk. Channel 7 for standard checks. Channel 2 for emergencies. Resupply every 10 days. He handed me the manila envelope. "Read this before dark. All of it before dark." He was already walking back down the trail. I watched him until the dead trees swallowed him up. Then I turned around and looked at the station. The thermal flat to the west was catching the late afternoon light, the steam rising off it in long white sheets that drifted east and dissolved somewhere above my head. The ground cracked and popped under my boots as I crossed the platform to the door. Inside, the layout was what I expected from the exterior. One main room with a cot, a desk, a wood stove, a 2-burner propane stove, and a wall of shelving stocked with canned goods and water jugs. A door on the north wall led to a narrow storage room. A second door on the west wall was sealed with a heavy bolt and had no handle on the inside. Stenciled on it in black paint were the words "Thermal Access." Below that, someone had written in permanent marker, "Do not open after dark." I sat on the cot, opened the envelope, and read. The first sheet was a hand-drawn map of the sector. The station sat at the center. To the north, a supply cache. To the south, the main trail back to the Norris Basin. To the west, the thermal flat marked with 6 observation points labeled T1 through T6, arranged in a rough arc along the near edge of the feature. Each point was circled in red. To the east, a ridge of dead timber with a single structure marked a secondary blind, purpose unlisted. The second sheet was a shift schedule, 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning. Sleep during the day. Work at night. The observation points were to be checked at 10 in the evening, 1 in the morning, and 4 in the morning. Radio checks at 11, 2, and 5. The third sheet was typed on Park Service letterhead. At the top it read, Observation Point Kilo, Norris Sector, Operational Guidelines. Below that, in handwriting that pressed hard enough to score the paper, someone had written, Read every word. Follow every instruction. Do not assume any rule is precautionary. I read. 1. Do not approach the thermal flat west of the station between 2 in the morning and 3 in the morning. If you are already at an observation point when 2 in the morning arrives, mark your position and return to the station immediately. Walk at a steady pace. Do not run. 2. The thermal features will change between visits. Vents that were active may become quiet. Quiet areas may begin venting. This is expected. Note the changes in your log. Do not investigate the cause. 3. If you hear a sound from beneath the thermal crust that resembles a human voice, note the time and your location in the log. Do not respond. Do not call out. Do not lean toward the source of the sound. Continue your route. 4. The observation blind to the east of the station may be used for shelter during severe weather only. At all other times, do not enter it. If you approach the blind and the door is open, do not close it. Return to the station and note the time in your log. 5. If you observe an animal moving toward the thermal flat rather than away from it, do not follow. If the animal enters the thermal area, do not pursue it. Note the species, the time, and the direction of entry. Do not search for the animal afterward. 6. If a thermal feature becomes active in a new location during your shift, mark the nearest observation point with the orange flagging in the supply room. Do not approach closer than 30 feet to any newly active feature. If a new feature opens within 30 feet of the station, do not evacuate without first radioing dispatch on Channel 7 and receiving explicit authorization. 7. The west door may be opened only between 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. If you must access the thermal flat at other times, use the north gate, which requires the blue taped key. The north gate route adds 12 minutes to the approach. Use it. 8. If you see another person on the thermal flat during your shift, do not approach. Radio dispatch on Channel 7 and provide a description. Wait for instructions before taking any action. The flat is closed to public access. Anyone you see there is not a visitor. 9. If the ground temperature around the station rises more than 15 degrees above the baseline reading posted on the wall beside the desk, move to the secondary position marked on your map. The secondary position is the rock outcropping 200 yards due east. Take the radio and at least 2 days of water. Do not return to the station until dispatch clears you. 10. Do not sleep with the west door unbolted. 11. Between 3 in the morning and 3:15 in the morning, remain inside the station. During this window, do not look through the west-facing window. If you are not yet back from the 1 in the morning observation check when 3 in the morning arrives, sit down where you are, close your eyes, and wait until 3:15 before moving. Do not try to see what passes. 12. If you find a handprint on the outside of any window, do not touch it. Photograph it and note the time. Continue your duties. 13. You will be alone in this sector for the duration of your posting. There are no other active stations in Norris Basin at this time. Anyone who contacts you claiming to be from a nearby station is not. Verify all contact through Channel 7 dispatch. I read the list twice. Then I checked my watch. 5:48 in the evening. The baseline temperature reading posted beside the desk showed 41 degrees Fahrenheit at ground level around the station perimeter. I noted it in the first logbook. At 6, I stepped outside for the first time since arriving. The thermal flat to the west was deep orange in the last of the daylight, the steam rising thick and slow in the cooling air. I walked the observation arc, T1 through T6 clockwise. Each point was marked with a short metal post and an orange band near the top. At each one, I noted the condition of the nearest thermal features, their activity level, their approximate diameter, any visible changes from the baseline photographs pinned to the wall inside the station. Everything matched the baseline. Nothing had changed. I returned to the station, logged the check, and ate dinner. The first 3 nights settled into a rhythm I recognized from backcountry work. Timed checks, careful logs, the particular quality of attention that comes from being alone in a place where mistakes have consequences. The sulfur smell never left. The thermal flat gurgled and hissed at all hours, an ambient sound that after the first night I stopped noticing the way you stop noticing traffic if you live near a highway. On the second night, I heard the voice for the first time. I was at observation point T4 during the 1 in the morning check. The air was cold enough that my breath fogged ahead of my flashlight beam. I was crouching to note a change in a vent near the point marker, a slight widening of the opening and a change in the steam color from white to faintly yellow, when I heard it. A sound from beneath the crust, low and rhythmic, rising and falling the way a voice rises and falls when it is speaking but too far away to make out words. I straightened up. The sound continued for perhaps 40 seconds, then stopped. I noted the time, the location, and the duration in my log. I did not lean toward it. I continued my route. On the third night, the voice was closer. I was between T3 and T4 when it started. This time it was not rhythm without words, it was words without meaning, syllables in the right order but wrong, language that almost resolved into something recognizable and then didn't. I kept walking. The voice followed me for 60 yards and then stopped at the edge of the active vent field as if it could not cross some boundary I couldn't see. On the 4th night, it said my name. I was at T2. The air was still, and the thermal flat was lit from below, the faint orange glow that sometimes came from the deeper features after dark, something about the bacterial mats and the mineral content catching the moonlight in a way the daytime light didn't produce. I was noting the temperature at T2 when my name came up through the crust, clear as someone standing 2 feet away and speaking at normal volume. I stood up. I did not respond. I did not lean toward it. I noted the time, 3:47 in the morning, and the location within 5 feet of the T2 marker, and I finished my check and walked back to the station at a steady pace and locked the west door behind me. In the logbook, I wrote voice at T2, used my name, did not respond, check completed. I stared at that entry for a long time. Then I added, voice had no echo. Everything else out there has an echo. The voice did not. The 5th night brought the handprints. I found the first one at dawn, technically outside my shift, when I went to the west-facing window to close the thermal access shutter for the daytime. It was on the outside of the glass, a single handprint, left hand, fingers spread, pressed flat against the pane. The palm was larger than a normal human palm. The fingers were the right length, but the proportions were wrong. Too much space between them, as if the hand had been stretched slightly in all directions. I photographed it with my phone and noted the time, 6:14 in the morning. I did not touch it. By the time I woke that afternoon, it was gone, not smeared, not wiped, gone, as if it had never been there. The glass was clean. I checked my phone. The photograph was still there, the print exactly as I had seen it. I noted the disappearance in the log and went about my pre-shift preparations. On the sixth night, I found 3 prints. 2 on the west window, 1 on the south. Same proportions, same pressed flat quality, as if the hand had been applying pressure from the outside. I photographed all 3 and noted the times. They were gone by the time I woke the following afternoon. I had started to understand that noting things was the job, not understanding them, not investigating them, noting them, and continuing. On the 7th night, the observation blind to the east had its door standing open. I saw it from the station porch at dusk, the dark rectangle of the open doorway visible at the edge of my flashlight range. The guidelines said not to close it, not to enter it. Return to the station and note the time. I noted the time, 6:43 in the evening, and went back inside. At 11, when I left for the first check, the door was still open. At 2 in the morning, still open. At 4, still open. By dawn, it was closed. I had not seen it close. I had not heard it close. It was simply closed, the latch seated, as though it had never been otherwise. I noted it in the log. I did not investigate. The 8th night was the first time I deviated from schedule, though not by choice. I was returning from the 1 in the morning check between T5 and T6 when the ground shifted under my left boot. Not a collapse, not the sudden give of a thin crust over a thermal void, but a slow subsidence a few inches over a few seconds, as if the earth was settling. I stepped back onto firmer ground and tested the affected area with the probe rod I carried. The crust was thin, too thin. New thermal activity working toward the surface at this location. I flagged it with orange tape as the guidelines instructed, marking the nearest post. Then I looked at my watch. 1:58 in the morning. 2 minutes until the restricted window. The station was a 4-minute walk on a good path. I could not make it in 2 minutes, not safely, not in the dark on ground that was now behaving differently than it had 40 minutes ago when I had come through this direction. The guideline said to sit down where you are, close your eyes, and wait. I sat down on the firmest patch of ground I could find, tucked my hands into my pockets, closed my eyes, and waited. The thermal flat was loud at night. I had grown used to the sounds, the hissing, the periodic percussion of a geyser vent releasing, the low, constant murmur of the hydrothermal system working beneath my feet. But in the 3 to 3:15 window, sitting with my eyes closed on the cold ground, I heard something else. Not from beneath the crust this time, from across it. A sound of movement, slow and deliberate. Something heavy crossing the thermal flat from west to east. The sound it made was wrong. Too even, too careful. Each step placed exactly like the one before it, with no variation in pressure, no shift in weight, the way an animal or a person shifts weight when they walk. Whatever it was, it moved like something that had studied walking, but had not been doing it long enough to do it naturally. I kept my eyes closed. The movement passed within 30 feet of me, close enough that I could feel the slight change in air pressure, close enough that the sulfur smell intensified momentarily and then faded. It continued east toward the station, toward the observation blind. I counted the seconds. I did not open my eyes. At 3:15, I opened my eyes. The thermal flat was empty in all directions. I stood, tested the ground ahead of me, and walked back to the station at a steady pace. The porch was undisturbed. The west door was bolted from the inside as I had left it because I had come back through the north gate. The observation blind was closed. I went inside and wrote in the log, 2 to 3:15 restricted window. Was outside due to ground instability. Sat in place per guidelines. Heard movement crossing from west to east. Did not observe source. Passed within approximately 30 feet. Sound pattern inconsistent with any animal I have encountered in 6 years of backcountry work. Blind was closed at 3:15. No other anomalies. On the 9th night, a voice came from the radio that had not come from dispatch. The 2 in the morning check was routine. I called in, gave the code phrase, received confirmation, signed off. At 2:40, the radio crackled without me touching it. Static, then a voice. Female, speaking in a measured tone that was almost official, almost the register of a Park Service dispatcher, but not quite. The rhythm was slightly off, the pauses came in the wrong places. Observation point Kilo, this is Norris Basin Coordination. Be advised, a secondary monitoring team will be approaching from the South Trail beginning at 3 in the morning. Please do not interfere with their equipment. I picked up the radio and keyed Channel 7. Dispatch, Observation Point Kilo. Can you confirm a secondary team approach for tonight? Over. The response came immediately. Kilo, dispatch negative. No secondary team authorized for Norris Basin tonight. Disregard any contact claiming otherwise. Confirm you received this. Over. Kilo confirms no secondary team. I received an unauthorized transmission on this channel at approximately 0240. Over. Copy Kilo. Do not respond to further unauthorized transmissions. Note them and report at your next scheduled check. Dispatch out. I set the radio down. At 3 in the morning, I looked through the south-facing window. The trail leading back toward the main basin was empty. Nothing moved. I noted the unauthorized transmission in the log and completed the 4 in the morning observation check without incident. On the 10th night, the resupply runner arrived. I heard the boots on the trail at 8 in the evening, well before dark had fully settled. A man in his 40s with a Park Service jacket and a loaded pack frame emerged from the tree line and called out his name and badge number before I had the door open. I verified the badge against the roster. It matched. I stood back and let him bring the supplies inside. His name was Garrett. He moved efficiently, unpacking canned goods and water and fuel cells and spare batteries without comment. He had the manner of someone who had done this route many times and did not particularly want to discuss it. When the pack was empty, he stood by the door and looked at the west-facing window. Thermal flat's been active lately, he said. Norris always ramps up in fall, but this year is different. I asked him what was different. He looked at me for a moment, assessing something. You following the guidelines, he said. It was not a question either. All of them, I said. He nodded, the same nod Duval had given me. Then he left. I watched him go down the trail and thought about his non-answer. I had asked what was different, and he had asked if I was following the guidelines. The two things were related. I didn't know how. I noted it anyway. On the 12th night, I found the prints on the thermal crust. I was at T3 during the 10 in the evening check when my flashlight caught them. A line of depressions in the softer bacterial mat at the edge of the active vent field. They were the right shape for footprints, oblong, evenly spaced, the stride length of an adult human. They led from somewhere in the middle of the active field toward the near edge, where the crust was stable enough to stand on. They stopped at the edge. There was no second set of prints leading back. Whatever had made them had come from the interior of the thermal flat. Whatever had made them had not returned the same way. I photographed them and noted them in the log. I did not measure them. I did not follow them. I continued the check and came back to the station and sat on the cot and ate a can of cold soup and thought about the sound I had heard during the restricted window, the even studied rhythm of something practicing how to walk. The guidelines had a rule about animals entering the thermal flat. It did not have a rule about things coming out of it. On the 13th night, the voice beneath the crust changed. I was at T1 when it started, quiet at first, the same rising and falling rhythm from the second night. But it did not stay rhythmic. It resolved partway into words. Not my name this time. A sentence, or almost a sentence, something that had the structure of a sentence without the coherence of one. It came up through the ground the way heat comes up through the ground, slow and pervasive and from no specific point. I kept my eyes on my route markers. I did not acknowledge it. I noted it in the log when I returned and wrote the words as best I could reproduce them, aware that what I was writing was probably not what the sound had actually been, but the closest approximation my mind would allow. On the 14th night, I found the second set of handprints. They were not on the windows this time. They were on the decking of the platform outside the west door. Both hands pressed flat, fingers pointing toward the door, as if someone had been kneeling on the platform and pressing their hands down to either side of themselves. The proportions were the same as before, too wide across the palm, too much space between the fingers. The prints were warm, not warm the way the deck was warm from residual ground heat, warm the way a palm is warm when it has just been lifted from a surface. I was outside at 10:15 in the evening. Whatever had made the prints had been on the platform within minutes of my shift beginning, perhaps while I was still inside checking my equipment. I noted the time and the temperature of the prints, warm to the touch, and went inside and bolted the west door and did not go back out until the 10 in the evening check via the north gate. On the 15th night, the restricted window came with something new. I was inside the station, seated on the cot, with the west window curtain closed, watching the clock move from 2:58 to 2:59 to 3 in the morning. I'd been doing this correctly every night since the first deviation. I was inside. I was watching. The window was closed. At 3:02, the light in the thermal flat changed. I should not have seen it. The curtain was closed, but the west-facing window had a small gap at the lower left corner where the curtain did not quite reach the sill. A gap I had noticed but not addressed because the guidelines said to cover the window, and I had covered it as fully as the curtain allowed. Through that gap, approximately 1 inch wide and 4 inches tall, I could see a sliver of the thermal flat. And through that sliver, at 3:02 in the morning, the flat was lit. Not by moonlight, the moon was behind the ridge, not by my flashlight, which was off. A pale blue-white light coming from the flat itself, from beneath the surface, moving slowly, as if something luminous was traveling through the hydrothermal channels beneath the crust at walking speed. It crossed my field of vision in about 40 seconds, moving north to south, and then it was gone, and the flat was dark again. At 3:15, I opened the curtain and looked out. The flat was dark and still. I noted the light in the log and wrote the time and the duration and the color and the direction of travel. Then I sat back down on the cot and thought about the footprints that came out of the thermal field and did not go back in. I thought about the sound of something practicing how to walk. I thought about light moving under the crust, the way something moves when it knows where it is going. I did not sleep well that day. On the 16th night, the voice knew things it should not have known. I was between T4 and T5 during the 1 in the morning check when it came up through the ground. My name first, as usual. Then, after a pause, the name of the street I grew up on, the town, the name of my younger sister, said correctly, said with the right inflection, said the way someone who had known me for years would say it, not the way someone reciting information would say it. I kept walking. I did not respond. I did not stop. T5 marker present, vent condition noted. T6, marker present, vent slightly enlarged since last check. Back to the station in 9 minutes and 20 seconds. Inside door bolted. In the log I wrote voice at T4 to T5 transition. Personal information, specific and accurate. Did not respond. Completed check. I sat for a moment, then added, voice is learning. I did not let myself think about what that meant in any direction beyond the log entry. Thinking about it would not help me do my job. Doing my job was the only thing that would get me to the end of this posting. On the 17th night, there was a knock at the station door. I was inside at 11:45 between checks eating. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. I set down my fork and counted to 30 before moving toward the door. There was no second knock during the 30 seconds. I opened the door. A woman was standing on the platform outside. She was wearing a Park Service uniform, the right shade of green, the right cut, the flat hat. Her badge caught the light from inside the station. I could not read the number from the doorway. She was standing at the outer edge of the platform, 5 feet away, just where the decking met the gravel approach. Badge, I said. She held it up. I needed to step forward to read it. I stayed in the doorway. Step closer to the light, I said. She moved half a step forward, just enough that I could read the number. I checked the roster without taking my eyes fully off her. The number was not on it. That number is not on my roster, I said. I know, she said. It's a new posting. The paperwork is delayed. You know how it is. I looked at her. The uniform was right. The badge format was right. Her voice was right, a little tired, a little rehearsed. The voice of someone who had been traveling all day. But her feet were wrong. She was standing on the platform decking, and I could not hear her boots on it. No creak of the composite material. No shift of weight. She was standing on it, but not pressing into it. Stay there, I said. I went to the radio. Dispatch, observation point Kilo. I have an individual at my station claiming to be Park Service. Badge number is unconfirmed against my roster. Request immediate verification. Over. Kilo dispatch. No personnel are assigned or en route to your sector tonight. Your station is single occupancy. Treat any unscheduled individual per guideline 13. Dispatch out. I went back to the door. She was still standing at the platform edge. Her expression had not changed. It was patient in a way that was slightly too patient, the patience of something that has time in quantities I don't. I'm going to close and secure this door, I said. She looked at me. A pause. Then she nodded, once, and stepped back off the platform and walked toward the thermal flat at the same steady, even, studied pace I had heard in the darkness during the restricted window. I closed and bolted the door. I keyed channel 7. Dispatch, Kilo. Individual has departed the station and is walking toward the thermal flat from the north approach. Over. Copy, Kilo. Do not follow. Dispatch out. At 2 a.m, the reflection check. The south window had condensation on it from the cold, and through the condensation I could see the observation blind to the east, clearly visible in the moonlight, its door standing open again. I had not seen it open. No one had been near it. The door was open. I noted it in the log. I closed the curtain and did not look at it again until dawn, when it was closed. On the 18th night, I walked out to T3 for the 10 in the evening check and found an object on the ground beside the marker post that had not been there before. It was a notebook. Park Service issued the standard green cover, the same kind I used for my logs. It was lying open face down as if someone had set it down mid-writing. I crouched and looked at it without touching it. The page it was open to was filled with handwriting, dense and small, filling the lines and the margins. I could read it in my flashlight beam. It was a list of rules, the same rules I had been given on my first day, written out in full in the same order with the same wording, and then continuing past the rules I knew, additional entries below. written in the same hand. 14. If you find this notebook, do not take it. Do not read beyond the rules you already know. Note its location in your log and continue your check. Return in daylight only. I stood up. I continued my check. T4, T5, T6, T1, T2, back to the station. In the log I wrote, found notebook at T3 appears to contain operational guidelines plus additional entries. Did not retrieve. Did not read beyond guideline 14. Will return at daylight per instruction. I sat on the cot for a while after that. The notebook had rules I did not have. Someone had written additional rules. Someone who had been at this station before me, or something that knew these rules existed and wanted me to see the rest of them. And the rule I had read said not to read them at night, which meant they could be read, which meant I was expected to go back for them, which meant they were real. At first light, I walked out to T3. The notebook was still there. I picked it up and brought it inside. Guideline 14 continued. If you find this notebook, bring it inside at first light. Read what follows only during daylight, with the west door bolted and the curtain closed. 15. The entity in the thermal system is not confined to the water. It uses the water the way you use roads. The flat is its transit, not its home. Its home is in the ground directly below this station. This is why the station is here, not to monitor the thermal features, to keep it below. The weight of a human presence at this location, consistent, attentive, following the specific protocols that were established over the years this station has operated, suppresses its movement toward the surface. When the station is empty, it rises. 16. The rules are not precautionary, they are the mechanism. Every time you follow a rule, you are reinforcing a boundary. Every time you deviate, the boundary weakens in proportion to the deviation. The boundary is not a wall, it is a habit. It is built from repetition, from attention, from the particular quality of human consciousness that holds a pattern steady over time. 17. It is learning your patterns in order to replicate them. This is not intelligence in the way you understand intelligence. It is more like water finding the shape of a container, or a root finding a crack in stone. It will take your face, your voice, your history. It will use them to get close enough to interrupt your routine. A single significant deviation, freely chosen, is enough to reduce the boundary below the threshold. 18. You will feel a compulsion to know what it is. This is not curiosity. This is it, exerting pressure through the boundary from below. When you feel the compulsion most strongly, sit on the floor in the center of the room and recite your current code phrase until the compulsion diminishes. 19. When your posting ends, write a full account and leave it where your replacement will find it. The boundary does not reset between postings, it is continuous. Every ranger who has held this posting correctly has extended the same boundary that the first one established. You are not starting over, you are continuing. Do not let it lapse. I read the notebook twice, then I set it on the shelf beside my own logbooks and went to sleep. When I woke that afternoon, I sat on the cot for a while before beginning my pre-shift preparations. I thought about 6 years of backcountry work, the things I had seen in a remote country, the things that had no clean explanation. I had always filed them under the heading of things I did not understand and continued working. That had kept me functional. It had kept me in jobs that other people left. It had brought me here. The boundary is built from repetition, from attention. Every time you follow a rule, you are reinforcing it. I got up, I inventoried my supplies, I tested my flashlight and my backup, I checked the west door bolt and the north gate latch and the temperature gauge on the wall. I wrote the baseline reading in the log. I sat down at the desk and prepared the night's route notes. At 6 in the evening, I stepped outside. The thermal flat was gold and gray in the fading light, the steam rising in long, slow columns. I walked to T1 and began the count. What lives beneath this ground had my face now, and my voice, and the name of my sister, and the street I grew up on? It was learning the way I walked and the way I checked the markers and the exact time I turned around at each observation point. It was patient in the way that has nothing to do with waiting and everything to do with the fact that for it, there is no time lost in the attempt, only information gained. I checked T2, vent condition unchanged. T3, marker intact. The ground beside it, where the notebook had been, was flat and bare. T4, T5, T6. I turned and walked back toward the station. The sulfur smell was heavy tonight, heavier than usual. The kind of heaviness that comes before a thermal event, a pressure change below the surface, something rearranging itself in the hydrothermal channels beneath my feet. I bolted the west door. I set the radio to channel 7. I opened the first logbook to the next blank page and wrote the date and the time and the shift number. Night 19. All markers present. Ground temperature within baseline. No anomalies to report. I set down the pen and looked at what I had written. Then below it I added one more line. I will be here when it rises. I will be here when it settles. I will be here tomorrow and the night after, and every night I am assigned to this station because the boundary is not a wall, it is a habit. And habits are built, one repetition at a time. I turned off the desk lamp and turned on my flashlight and began another night of watching.